Hi, good afternoon, and welcome. John Krant, SelfRecruiter.com, and welcome to the new online series for 2021. Today is January 20th, 5 p.m. Hopefully it's a good day for most folks out there. It's good, certainly a good day. Feels like a good day here. Well, tonight we're going to tackle resume renovation. And, that's a challenge so many of us are dealing with in this modern world of a pandemic situation. Now, there's some great news being a new year. Of course, we are well into several working vaccines and a little bit of the rollout for all of that. But we still have quite a time before things return to what normal used to be. And that means for the next year, we're going to continue to work mostly remotely, wherever possible. And we have to prepare for that even on our resume. So let me just share my screen. Welcome here. Let me just share my screen here just a second here. There we go. And up on the screen. Let me also get my remote control. Always good to have those things so we can click through. So welcome again. Tonight is going to be a refresher really on how to recharge and re-energize all of your job search activities. It's about how you take back control. Now, tonight is going to be the first session. So this is the resume renovation for January 20th. Tomorrow, that is the 21st, Thursday the 21st, 12 noon. I'll be back right here again with my LinkedIn Showplace lecture, how really to use LinkedIn for both managing your career and for job search and outreach activities. Then on the 26th, I'll be back here at 5 p.m. And that's all about interviewing in a pandemic world and all the adjustments we really have to make, because it's your job to teach them how to select you, not wait to be selected. So that's a really great lecture there. And then I'll be back on the 28th. That is on 12 noon, and that is a Thursday. And we will have basically the overall how to supercharge your job search, how to really have a structured job search that produces interviews and opportunity for yourself that really isn't there right now. As we move ahead tonight, this is resume renovation. Boy, I chose that title for very specific purposes. Think about what goes into a renovation. Let me just come full screen here. I think I can move around just a little bit here. If we think about, there we go, that's a little better. If we think about what goes into a renovation, I was lucky enough a few years back to do my kitchen and my bathroom. And unfortunately, I am not of the means to be able to go live someplace else during that. So that's like 4 months of devastation all around you. And what do most people do? What did I do? Ran out to Home Depot, grabbed some plastic, grabbed the tape, trying desperately to cover and protect all those things that are around that are not involved in the renovation. Now, I wish I had something really valuable in my apartment. I really don't. But I have a lot of things that I have emotional connection to. A hand-carved little frame with my father from really the 1930s, where he's in his confirmation picture, looking so young. Of course, he's passed now, many years ago. I want you to think about things like that. You have things like that right on your resume, things that are very emotionally important to you, things you're attached to, but really have no business being on the resume. That's where the renovation part comes down to. If we're going to break down these walls and rebuild, we're going to have to sit and learn a new way of doing things. And that means very different things than we've done in the past. So as we move ahead and begin to start our renovation, I want you to start with this simple idea. A lot of people think, well, I just need to have a better looking resume, a better typeset resume. Yes, format is part of the solution. Typesetting is part of the process, but formatting and typesetting alone will not solve it for you. That's one of the issues. We have to solve the story issue as well. Now, I've worked with clients for the last 10 years, one-on-one. The one thing I can tell you universally is individuals are really not great at telling their own story. Now, they've lived it, so they have a different perspective, but they're not very good at telling their own story. So what it really takes is an outside perspective, and most of the time with my clients, that's me, someone that has emotional care but has no emotional connection. I care deeply, but I'm not connected at all. I can think like a strategic individual, being someone that may be playing chess, 8, 10, 12 moves ahead. That's the way you need to think about it. So we're going to have to tackle both of these issues, both the story and the format itself. And to take care of the pandemic, we're also going to have to show that we can work remotely. Whether you've worked remotely in the past or you've never worked remotely or you've struggled through it, if you have been working this past year, it's not only being able to produce, but you also have to effectively engage, and you have to be able to charm and disarm in ways that we can't do at the water cooler in the hall with a little bit of small talk, because now has to be done essentially from long distance. Now, if you've never worked remotely, you're probably a little bit panicked. You're going to have to essentially get hired over video, and you're going to work remotely for quite a while until we're really all immunized and ready to go back into those collegial places again together. But you're in a panic. Your story doesn't have remote work. Well, how about different experiences you've had that you can recast in a slightly different light? You can tell the story still truthfully, but in a slightly different way. Where have you dealt with offsite vendors or managers, or maybe you've had an offsite team member you had to interact with? Maybe it was just one, but that's an illustration. Or maybe there were offsite customers you interacted with, or clients or partners. A lot of different angles to the experience we might have had that we have to think about. But maybe you've also been a speaker or presenter. Maybe you've talked to conferences around the country, or maybe you've given webinars. Maybe you've already worked remotely in this format right here. That's another way to think about it. And of course, speaking and presenting on conference calls, which most of us do in our work life, even when we had to go into the office. This requires a paradigm shift in the storytelling. It's a metamorphosis, a freeing of ourselves. Now, if you haven't seen me before, John Krant, author, career coach, and speaker, resume and LinkedIn guru. Really, let me tell you just a little bit about my background, because it's important that you understand anybody that's teaching you, where does their information come from? So I have 7 or 8 years in outside recruitment. That's a traditional headhunter on a desk. Had to go into those competitor companies, go find the superstar, lure them out, and get them to go see my company that I'm representing. It's really very similar to being a glorified dating guru, millionaire matchmaker. Well, that might have been another route. Maybe that's the route I should have gone. But 7 or 8 years doing that, really being privy to all those private discussions behind the scenes between myself and the individual, between myself and the hiring person, between myself and the HR person. So many different conversations and impressions behind the scenes, seeing things that we don't consider in our resume or in our LinkedIn or in our interviewing technique. Of course, in the 7 or 8 years time frame, I got promoted a couple of times. I also became the national trainer. We had a 100 office recruiting system. So as each person would come into the program, essentially to teach them how to be a recruiter, they'd be in my 90-day program to teach them all the ins and outs and how hiring really works, which is not how people think it works. Otherwise, we wouldn't really need sessions like today. Of course, I became VP over all 100 offices before heading out on my own. And of course, for the last 10 years, I give lectures in a non-pandemic year to many, many organizations. The New York Public Library's Job Search Central, which I'll be speaking at or for online in a couple of weeks. New York State Department of Labor, Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses program, and many, many others along the way. One person has to be in charge, though. It's not me. It's you. Of course, I'll let you look at my book. There are a lot of good ideas in my book. You can check all that out over on my website, SelfRecruiter.com. A few other resources before we jump into tonight's topic. These will help you both on the resume and the other things that you may be struggling with in your job search. Piggybacking on tonight, don't let your resume become resume roadkill. Now, these articles you can get to right on my LinkedIn profile, John Krant. Just go over to my LinkedIn profile. You can also get to it quite easily from my website, which is SelfRecruiter.com. And just look under the articles I've posted. You'll see this, how your resume does not become resume roadkill, or the keys to supercharging your job search, or avoiding the number one mistake that's very devastating. Really, that's time mismanagement. That is the lecture coming up on the 28th. If you haven't seen the LinkedIn lecture, don't want to wait and want to go see it right now, of course, it's available right on my website homepage, about halfway down the page. You can see me large or see the slides large, whatever you like. And that will help you as a step-by-step tutorial to build out a much better LinkedIn profile. By the way, tomorrow at noon is my LinkedIn lecture. Hopefully you come back right here for that. Well, a self-recruiter, what really is it? It's a person that takes control, a person really that works with one great recruiter, which is also you. And that one great recruiter only works with one great candidate. So boy, it's a tight partnership. You have to become this self-motivated individual in your job search. You have to take control. That means you're going to begin to network in a very, very different way. Of course, that's tomorrow's 12 noon LinkedIn lecture. But it also means you have to keep one eye on the toughest competitor imaginable. Those 4, 5, or 6 people that, oh my gosh, they're after my job. Those perfect people. I don't know if you've seen one yet. Have you met one? I'm not sure I really have. I mean, we all would like to be perfect, but hey, we're human beings. We're not perfect. So we have to look at those folks, not let them jar us, but we do have to plan on how we're going to outmaneuver them, how we're going to beat them, because we just can't go after the job, expect we're going to get that job. It really doesn't work that way. Everybody's sitting back home doing the same thing you're doing. They're hitting that darn button over and over. Almost never does it really say apply. Always almost says submit, all capital letters, until we're so submissive. It's like a Friday night waiting for the phone to ring. Oh, it's going to ring. It's going to ring. When it does, it'll be a telemarketer. We have to get out of this rut that we have made ourselves that puts us in a very unhappy place. So let's start fresh. Get over whatever issues you've been carrying along with you. Yes, if there's something to fix, adjust, change, absolutely. And then quit looking in the rearview mirror and begin to look forward. We have to change things dramatically, which means you have to give yourself permission to let the past go. You have to consider the usual, customary, and expected, and understand that most times in job search and with Resume Today, we have to do a little more unusual, unconventional, unexpected approach. Your job is to be persuasive. Be persuasive. Why does the resume still matter in this world? I mean, you have to be persuasive. Your LinkedIn is probably pretty persuasive if it aspires to be that 3-dimensional sales brochure all about you that I teach tomorrow at noon. But why does the resume still matter? Well, the resume tends to be the initial point of contact. Well, not always. Sometimes it could be social media or your LinkedIn or many other things. But most times it tends to be the resume. First time they're aware of us. And first impressions are very, very important. So this is where you begin to take control of the discussion, where you begin to shape how others think of you. But you have to understand the challenge. If you don't understand the challenge, you're going to put something together that really does not sell your assets. Now, by the numbers, because you have to understand the challenge to really solve the issues. Who can read 1,000 to 2,000 resumes? Because that's what's being sent in. If this is a decent job that you're after, that's 1,000 to 2,000 resumes being sent in. Let me get a little drink of water here. Who can read every one of those in addition to doing all their normal work? I don't really know anybody that can read that, but I don't think still we're not really clear. So it's 1,000 emails, 1,000 resumes, and there's 1,000 cover letters. In addition, if it was only 1,000, but we still don't have a full grasp on the level of challenge. Because if it's a recruiter, and I don't care if that's an internal recruiter that's labeled recruiter that works for HR, or if it's an external headhunter recruiter like I was, recruiters tend to work on 10 open jobs at the same time, or they typically don't get that title recruiter. Who can read 10,000 emails, 10,000 cover letters, 10,000 resumes? I think pretty quickly you realize no one can read anything. And if you throw yourself to the mercy of that applicant tracking system, all those just pull my resume out. Well, good luck for that. You can probably stop at the bodega and buy a lottery ticket too. Probably plan your financial future. We can't take risks like that. We have seconds to capture their imagination. You have to think about how do you not only showcase yourself as eminently qualified and capable, that's all those little ghosted images there, but with this little orange one is also special, different, capable and qualified just like the rest, but also special and different. How are you going to be both? By the way, if you're only capable and qualified, interchangeable, I can pay you less. And if you don't want less, well, then I'll go to the next one. Who wants less? Someone in that line wants less. You have to be capable, qualified, interchangeable, and somehow be unique and exceptional and special. Very likely it's going to take you 4 or 5 maybe even 6 iterations of your resume to get to the right version. I don't want to set an expectation. You're going to listen to tonight's lecture. You're going to maybe even watch it 2 or 3 times to capture all the little secrets, go back and do all the work. Maybe you've done 2-3 hours of work on the resume and you think you're done. Well, you probably have the first iteration of your resume. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You probably have to get to 5 iterations. So as each one is ready, you take a look at it. What's better? What's improved? What works? And then you pick it up and you do the 3-second test, which I'll teach you coming up shortly. Back to the drawing board. So what's your story? Because really the resume has to contain life, energy. It has to inspire them. What's your story? Now, most people don't even know it. They know where they've worked. They know what their titles were. They know a few things that they've accomplished, but they mostly know all the things they didn't like along the way. They'd like to avoid those. We probably have to close down for inventory. Now, this is something I do with my individual clients. It's not a secret that I work one-on-one with clients to reinvent their resume and reinvent their LinkedIn profile and coach them through every scenario that's out there. So what I do with my clients when I'm going to reinvent is we sit down and we have about a 90-minute discussion that is a deep dive interview or interrogation. Really, that's closer to an interrogation because in my mind, I'm asking them every single thing that I can get to that I don't see. Well, how about before this job? What else were you doing? Did you do this? What about over here? I'm digging around, looking under the bed, in the closets, under every rock, looking for every piece of story element that somehow got lost along the way. You've been so close to your story, you've dismissed most of it. That was so long ago. Oh, that was nothing. Oh, that was 10 years ago. Really? There's some amazing stuff that can be used from 10 years ago to tell and elevate your story. If you sit down and really grill yourself, interrogate yourself, come up with everything that's ever happened from the moment you left school to today, like I do with my clients, you'll probably come up with 8 or 9 pages of notes all about you. There's the starter. Why don't you simply grab a highlighter and be very stingy? As you look across all of these 8 or 9 pages of notes, you're going to see things that, oh, I love that. Oh, yes. Only the exceptional items get highlighted. Only very stingy. Only the exceptional ones. That will teach you the core elements that have to become part of the resume. Then the rest, you're going to have a little negotiation with yourself to which one rises to be the level of being resume worthy, and does it work? And then we also have to understand just a little bit about branding and our brand and all the things that can separate us out from others and how that might help us. Really, we have to answer one simple question, and the question is really not that difficult. The question is, if I'm this person that has to answer the one simple question, that's what I meant to do. Why is it going to be the best business decision if I hire you? Now, I doubt they're really going to ask you that, but the core parts of your message, the core parts of your resume, the core parts of your LinkedIn profile, all of your approach has to communicate the very best reasons why they should hire you today. And it has to be very compelling. If you work the answers to that into your presentation, it's going to work very, very well for you. Oh, there we go. A little mid-size here. Mid-size is a little bit nice as well. So on the personal branding element, focus in on this question. You just heard me say it. Think about all the reasons which would make you that very, very special standout. We're going to take this one center stage, and I'm going to get out of the way here. This is a resume that was presented to me at the New York Public Library many years ago. I was giving the lecture. Someone comes up on stage. It was like getting hit in the head with a brick, as you just saw there. And of course, if you haven't seen me before, you may not be aware of my constant energy. But yeah, I have a lot of energy. I'm well caffeinated. I have a lot of passion for what I talk about. And by the end of a 90-minute lecture at the library, there's a lot of adrenaline running. Here comes this brick in the head of wall of text. And suddenly I feel like I'm falling asleep. I better ask a question. Won't be good if I fall asleep. What would you like to do? Oh, I'd like to work in events. Oh my God, good energy. Have you ever worked in events? Ouch. Let's go back and get me on screen here to take a look here. Oh, maybe go mid-size. It's all right here, but we can't really see it. what we see is an impressive law firm. We see one or two things and we go, oh, you're a law firm person, more law firm for you. In fact, that's what this person was being told. Oh, more law firm for you. Didn't want to necessarily work at a law firm. We go center stage here so we can get bigger and go into a little bit more detail here. So even if we zoom in, I mean, it doesn't really help. Now think about it. I am me with all of my background, and I can't see it says events coordinator right there. If I can't see it, who do you think can see it? So I zone out like everybody else. I'm like, oh, I don't know about that. Let's go full screen again. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what do you want to do? And we move to other questioning. This is the same exact background, but we only tell the correct side of the story. We tell the side of the story as the event specialist, did event planning, photo shoots, coordinating assignments, facilitating all sorts of things. And you know what? Beyond all of that, you know what they did? They worked A+ venues. Where'd you do these things? Heller Gallery, Guggenheim, Lincoln Center, Morgan Library Museum, Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York Public Library. Oh my gosh, those are A+ venues. Why don't you tell that story? You would be hired tomorrow. Really important. You're going to have to go through this transformation in your own storytelling because it has to change. You cannot tell it the way you have been telling it. You are a product. Your job now is to get out there and represent this as the best thing since sliced bread. And you have to believe it. You have to believe it more than the next 5 or 6 people. That's how you create engagement. But it's really closer to this kind of engagement. Small changes change perception. How are you going to change perception with your personal branding? So back to the idea of what the brand is. You saw this a little bit earlier. It's all those things that separate you from the others. Let's zoom in here. We're going to take this full screen. Hold on one second here. Let's zoom in here and take a look. Now, here's a few resumes I just pulled off the internet. So careful where you put your resumes. Someone had been collecting resumes on Pinterest. And I'm like, oh, I like resumes. Let's take a look. So Kelly here says fresh, smart, good-looking design. Well, kudos to Kelly on his or her brand. Big, bold, you know, your name is your brand. Now, I'm not sure shades of yellow was really the right choice. On screen, it's hard to look at. When I print it out, it prints out as shades of gray. That's impacting the brand already. And that's the last positive thing I have to say about this resume. We're gonna zoom in this a bit larger here. The major problem you see with this resume is information architecture. You know, just like any big building, even if it's not impressive, it's a big building. Everything had to be decided in advance for things to function. Someone had to make all of those decisions, an architect. Same thing happens to your resume. What if they only read 30% of your resume? No, 15% of yours, 10% of your resume. Which 10, 15, or 30% do you want them to read? That's your job, is to get them to read the part that you want. Here, I start with a multiple column setup. I don't know if I'm supposed to go up to down, left to right. How's it supposed to work? And very quickly, I lose some interest. Let's look at our next one here. We're going to zoom in a little bit here as we shift over to our next one to look at. Now, Julia here, can't miss that brand. Now, I did not write these comments down at the bottom, but you may see the comment. We're going to just come in and so I can talk to you a little bit here. Says who said the name had to be at the top anyway. Okay, I'll say it. The name has to be at the top. The subtitle of my book is Changing the Rules. Change any rule that doesn't work for you. This is a rule you cannot change. There are certain rules you have to understand you cannot change. By moving the name down to the middle of the page, what's happened here? Now I've created an information architecture problem. Am I supposed to read then below Julia before I go up to the top? How's it supposed to work? And very, very quickly, it's out of control. The other thing here is I cannot see Julia's employers. Now, you may say, well, John, they seem to be a little bit of out of focus on the employers. Yes, I get that. But if they were in focus, I still can't see them. I would have to go dig through the text to find the employers. The employers deliver virtually every single ounce of your value. Like it or not, it's determined by the employers you did it for. I can't even find the employers. What I can find is the only reason I will not hire you. Dates. Dates are a reason I do not hire you. Dates are never, ever a reason I would hire you. And think about the I pattern here. What's expected on a normal resume? Name at the top, employer title, employer title, employer title, education at the bottom. It's a reverse half moon they're expecting. So they look at the top, and all that's by the I pattern are the dates. The reason I wouldn't hire you. Yes, dates are expected, but why would we have them in the I pattern instead of way off to the right, the way I'll teach you here? Martin here, kudos to Martin on his brand. I really get it, and boy, it makes an impact. Not really sure. Let me just come back in here. I'm really not sure it's worth 25% of the entire real estate to tell me your brand. In fact, backed up at a distance to this resume, it creates an information architecture problem with these two columns. I don't know if I'm supposed to go up, down, left, right, how that's supposed to work. And if I'm really being honest with you, all I can actually see is education, internship, and personal skills. And those are silly labels. Has nothing to do with Martin's value. Gimmickry is what I absorbed from this resume, which is not what we're after. We're after effectiveness out of the resume, effectiveness within seconds. We are this product, and within seconds, they have to be almost jumping out of their chair. The interest has to be there. Yes, by the way, be capable and qualified, because honestly, I wouldn't hire anybody that wasn't capable and qualified, but that's not why I hire you. I certainly do not hire you because you're capable and qualified, but I'd never hire anyone that was not. Why I hire you is why are you interesting? What makes you tick? In addition to being capable and qualified. You know why? Because I have to spend my waking life with you. Even if today it tends to be on Zoom calls or in Slack or all of those type of tools. Yeah, but I have to spend a lot of time with you. So the more I like you, the better our work will be together. That goes into the hiring decision. We'll talk lots more about that during the interview session. So just to clarify a little bit between these two, because they're both marketing documents about you, your resume is about catching or piquing that interest. Oh, interesting. Have to take a closer look. LinkedIn is about closing the deal with you as the very best individual in their mind. This is about influencing how they see you. It's part of your personal branding. You want to be this wall of text hitting people in the head with a brick? Is that what you want? Or do you want to be something that doesn't function even when you zoom in? Clarity and influence. That's what we're after here. Clearing our story so it works and influencing others so they feel the same thing about our value. This clarity is about our career path, our story, and influencing the value level that you've built by all the contributions in your career. That's what happens on the new version. This is the same resume as that brick in the head, but on the new version, it comes to life. I hope you also have noticed by now, there is not a single sentence anywhere on this resume. Let me be super clear. If I'm reinventing a resume for one of my clients, there is not a single sentence anywhere on the resume. Why would I have a resume with a sentence on it in a world where people don't read? No one reads any longer. So certainly can't put sentence structure, have to put things in a way that's absorbable within seconds to create the engagement, which of course is closer to that type of engagement. Now, as we dive into the resume renovation, there are really 5 areas that you have to focus on to create a winning resume. This is a dynamite resume that is a sales tool for you. It's a cheat sheet, not about your entire background, but just the best parts of your story because you're this product. Think of it as a product sheet almost. Resume, the new definition. Now, I know it takes a lot of ink to write this one down. Are you ready for it? We'll come back to that in just a minute here. I'm off my slides here. Your resume's goals. We're going to come back to each of these, tell you a little bit more. Understanding stacks of resumes and, of course, the 3-second test. So back to the first one, we really talked about this. You're this product, or at least they're going to buy your time and talents. We get that whole idea. So why is your product going to be better than just the store brand? You want to be seen as the national brand, the elevated, the one that gets the spotlight. Resume, the new definition, where I thought we were a minute ago. Well, this is this simple sales sheet about you that creates desire. You know, a few years back, I did it 4 years in a row, but a few years back, I was up on stage for the first time at Reverend Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Push Wall Street project. I got invited in, and they're going to have 5 career coaches, and we're going to have a roundtable discussion, Q&A, and we each get 12 minutes to present. Oh, 12 minutes. Gosh, what will I do in 12 minutes? Of course, I can do a lot in 12 minutes. And what I decided to do, thinking about the audience, was, go full tilt evangelical in my approach. And I had 40 slides flying behind me in 12 minutes of motivational pitch. And I got the very first question, and I got 30 to 35% of all of the questions. I was also the only non-African American on stage and the only male on stage other than the Reverend. Think about that. Now, after I gave my talk about the simple sales sheet that creates desire, another one of the coaches got up and says, interesting, a resume that creates desire. Well, when I was reinventing myself, I think the book is still in print. I'm like, what? When you were reinventing yourself and you think the book is still in print and you think you might have something relevant still to tell us, you have to think about everything that you present and create and make sure you don't disrupt your own future, just as that speaker did. Your resume's goals, well, its mission in life is to deliver the interview. If your resume is delivering the interviews that you want, very likely do not need to change it. If it is not delivering the interviews that you want, you very likely do need to change it. And what you're after is a clear, clean, straightforward format. This is a format where the information itself is put together in such a way that it can just jump off the page, be absorbed. Ooh, think of that word. Be absorbed so easily by those that have interest. Of course, it has to clearly inform about educational background as well. Now, understanding stacks of resumes. Let me just come in a little bit closer for this one. Understanding stacks of resumes. As you send your resume off to wherever you might send it, now keep in mind, I think those of you that have seen me speak before, I am not a fan of applying online. In fact, if you're my client and I find out you've been applying online, I am not happy. By the way, I know some of my clients apply for some stuff online. I get it. That's human nature. But if it's very important to you and if it's something that you want, I recommend you go directly. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in tomorrow's 12 noon lecture on LinkedIn. That's where we do most of our warm-up to begin our outreach using social media and different approaches there. So tune in tomorrow. But if I didn't listen to John, I did hit that darn submit button. What happens? Well, of course, what happens is your resume is going to go off towards some gigantic black hole in space called the data warehouse. If it reaches the data warehouse, kiss that resume goodbye. Probably never going to see it again. But on the way to the data warehouse, it does stop in front of a human being. And there's your chance. It stops right here in front of a human being. I then get to evaluate it. And you go into one of 3 stacks. There might be somebody in here. By the way, that is the good stack, stack number 1. Oh, maybe. Have to come back. But they don't come back. They don't come back because they have this whole river of incoming new resumes. Why would I go back to these people that couldn't quite explain it to me the first time when I have these new exciting people to look at? Stack 2 becomes a dead end. Thanks, but no thanks. And of course, the third stack is the thanks, but no thanks. Really, I don't even know why you sent this resume in. Understanding stacks of resumes and how you're going to fit into that. Now, the secret to this process you may not like is the amount of time until they're going to put you in one of those stacks. Literally 3 to 5 seconds. You will never get longer than 5 seconds. Now, 1,000, 2,000 resumes stacked up in a pile, they pick each one up and they're like, which stack do you go into? Quick evaluation. How will you do it? So your first goal, no matter what, in all the approach to resume is how do I get this resume into stack 1? What do I need to change in the story? What do I need to change in the format? If I don't get into stack 1, it is very unlikely anyone will ever actually read the resume. Certainly never probably going to read the cover letter statistically, and probably not ever going to read your email statistically. They can't read that volume. In fact, the only time they can really generally even read your email and cover letter and the complete resume is once you've already gotten down to the 8, 10, 12, 15 that they might seriously look at. Maybe they can talk to 6 or 8 of them if they're really aggressive. But until you get down into that reasonable, 15, 20 zone, probably not too much is going to get looked at. 1-page resume, unless it's 2, think you see how I feel on this one. I am not happy. There's no time I'll tell a client that they can have a resume. A 2-page resume is only because you don't have the confidence to sell yourself. Now, resume length happened to come up during one of my Department of Labor lectures a few years back. I was giving a LinkedIn lecture, and of course, resume comes up during the lecture. They are related to one another. And I happened to mention a single-page resume in all cases, and this gentleman in back flips out. He's like, "Oh, come on! What if you got a 30-year career and you're CEO? It's never going to fit." Okay, take a breath. I get it. I hear you, but I don't think you're not liking my response. I don't think that's about my answer. I think that's because you sit here and go, "Well, how did I get here? What am I doing here? How come no one can see my value?" And I get it. Of course, this guy did too. He turned around, he hired me, no surprise there, sends me his stuff. It is 6 pages of my eyes bleeding. I can't even get through this thing. I know some of our backgrounds, we love that CV type endless format to put people to sleep. Never going to fit? You just don't know how to edit. Once you reach a certain level, you need almost no content. It is your brands and your titles that do the talking with just a few trinkets of your accomplishments mixed in. Once we had this streamlined down, because this guy was impressive, CEO and COO before that and CFO before that. Oh my gosh, 30 years of endless impressiveness distilled down to a single page like a giant exclamation point. Boom. Of course, he's the CEO again. That's what happens when you tell the right story and not the wrong story. Single page resume. Now, what are we looking at? We're looking at your name, which is your brand, your current or last 3 employers and titles, and your educational background. Here's where we do a little listening test, because right after this, I'll hear people say, oh, John said put the last 3 employers and titles. I did. When did I say that? I said what we're looking at are the last 3 employers and titles, and that's for time relevance of your skills. If you asked me a different question, oh, John, what would you like on a resume? What would I like? I'd like a resume to be complete from the time you enter the workforce to today. Take a breath. Take a breath. I didn't say that was the right thing for you. You may need to cut some of your background. If you've been working since the early 1970s, we don't need to know all of that. We need to know the more relevant stuff now. And we need to diminish some of that background. We'll show you some resumes that handle those issues. But keep in mind what we are looking at and where most of the story space should go. Now, if you have your resume, pull it out. No reason to be embarrassed, obviously. We're over video. This is just for you. I want to teach you how the 3-second resume test works. As you complete your new resume, first iteration, put it through the 3-second test, then back to the drawing board. So pick up your resume when I tell you in a moment. I'll count it off in my head, and some that may not have the resume will see it. And when I tell you to stop, just answer rhetorically to yourself, what is it that you can tell yourself about this person that is you? And you're going to have to look, obviously, with fresh eyes. Go ahead and take a look. And stop. And for those that were looking at me and not the resume, you saw me count off 1001 to 1005. It will never go longer than that. And you're in one of those stacks. Now, most people, when I do that live at the public library, they'll look up and they're like deer in the headlights, like, oh, I can't tell you anything about this person. And they're me. That's a resume that seriously has to change. I object to objective statements really all of the time. If there's not going to be a sentence on my resume, there's certainly not going to be an objective statement, another brick in the head. And plus, no one really cares what you want when you grow up someday. What you want is to take all of that space from a traditional objective statement and use it in a different way. I call the way you're going to use it, or the way I recommend using it, the positioning title. So all of that space can go away, and I can replace it with something as simple as 4, 5, or 6 words that can replace this giant paragraph. Even looking at this paragraph here, what do I really read? The word profile. And then I get to high energy. I don't feel high energy looking at that. Well, high energy events planner specialist. It's the same exact person. We didn't need all that nonsense, up at the top. Now, if you have a more complex background or you're after multiple positions, maybe you have something a little bit different up there. These here are to show you possibility. To me, the positioning title space is what always changes on the resume every single time. Nothing down the page should change in the resume, or you didn't create the right resume in the first place. Just the positioning title every time, so when they see it, they almost gasp. It's always the position you are after, Whether you've ever held that position or not is irrelevant. You're presenting yourself as qualified. Now, if you do have a more complex background, or maybe you're trying to accomplish a more complex transition, you may need a multiple line positioning title. I'm going to show you this whole resume a little bit later, so we'll talk about why this person was choosing this. We'll show you that one coming up here. Or we can go back to this wall of text that really doesn't work for folks, doesn't really accomplish much, and really doesn't achieve anything from the personal branding perspective. If you look really closely, there's so many inconsistencies in the original version too. Look at even the dates. It's 2TO on the one, it's a dash on the other dates. When you go in closely, there's lots of inconsistencies. Consistency is an important part of selling and telling your story. This version, this fresh version, still elevates the law firm to a very impressive level, but it lets the individual shine under that big brand, not get lost under that big brand. Think about it. This heavy text like this becoming hopefully something that clarity just happens, just like that. Or we can go back to the text part that gets heavy again and really doesn't work, and it's not a really good look. So we need to move away from that. We need to think about, well, if that's not going to really work for me, then how do I do something else with it? How do I create something fresh with it? That is really the guiding reason most people tend to work with a coach like myself, someone that can take this and clarify it for you. And sabbatical. So those that have been reaching out to me, I guess I did take a few months sabbatical at the end of 2020. We needed to get that 2020 behind us, but I am back in the saddle and on now. Here's the bottom of that resume. I wanted to show you this part here. This person was mature, as many of us get to, but they were so worried about being mature, they took out the scissors and started cutting the resume. Cut. We're going to cut this thing all over. And they cut off Martha Stewart Living. You want to work in events and you cut off Martha Stewart Living? It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Or you cut off House Beautiful magazine, where you did event-related things. Well, hey there and welcome back. Gosh, somehow we had a little bit of an internet issue there. Let me just share my screen again. And hopefully we'll get right back on track here. Sorry about that. There we go. So as you look here, even the last place, European Travel and Life magazine, she's doing, again, event-related activity. You have to think about how you're going to make this work for you and how you're going to tell that right story. Now, I promised you more story on this one here. This was very interesting. This is a gentleman from the Carolinas. He called me up and he said, I have had a great run. I've been here 11, 12 years. This is the time we worked together. And but I'm so done selling furniture. He was selling commercial office equipment, someone that might sell, like, say, 1,000 desks. And suddenly, I'm so done. But every time he was sending out his resume, they're like, we don't need a furniture salesperson. Quit talking about furniture. Now, let's think about this here. There's certainly some indicators up on screen here that there's furniture here. But what this person's after, when I said, well, what do you really want to do? Oh, I want to be in software, hardware, services. I'm like, that's a great field. Have you ever done it? And actually he did about 15 years earlier. Okay. I bet you some of the folks watching today have that same issue. 15-year-old experience they're trying to sell now. So how do we do that? Well, his initial resume was almost all filled with the last 11, 12 years, the current job. A couple footnotes of what was earlier, but the earlier stuff was what we had to sell. We took the last 11, 12 years, condensed it down to this super paragraph you see right here, and then we removed the furniture. Take it off there. It doesn't say furniture anywhere. Now, it does say corporate office furnishings in that first line. You may see that. $120 million provider, okay? Every single thing in this bullet list would make the sales manager jump out of their chair. $50 million cumulative sales to date, ranked top 10 in revenues every year since 2002. These are all basically the reasons to interview this one. Up at the positioning title, they did a little sleight of hand too. Oh, sales professional, software, hardware, services. Just what I'm looking for. Well, Price Modern, of course, is furniture, not software, hardware, services. Further on down the resume, they were then able to expand where they did do software, hardware, services, so the reader could see the connection. It would make sense. Something else to teach you from the bottom of a resume here. Now, yes, there's a whole resume on top of this one, but if you do get out the scissors and decide you need to start cutting part of your background, okay, I understand that. Start and stop the story where it's appropriate. Now, in this client's case, we decided to begin his story or end his story, depending which way we look at it, showing the first employer, even though it wasn't really the first employer, as EDS, Electronic Data Systems. Of course, we have prior employers, but let's stay with EDS for a second. If you're unfamiliar with them, they are one of those employers. You know, every field has employers that are simply amazing. Like if they hired you, must be something special about you. Financial industry, do we know who that is? Goldman Sachs. There's only one of them. No matter what we think of them, they're the one. EDS has that same type of reputation. You must be amazing. But look at the prior employment just below this. 3 employers, 2 of these 3 employers also rise to that same stunning level. Kaiser Permanente and PwC PricewaterhouseCoopers, same stunning level. This stuff is great. How do we get this out there? Those 3 additional employers, by the way, added 17 years of additional background. Anybody on this call need to be 17 years older until next time? Not most folks. Hey there, Eva, I see you on there. Not most folks don't need that. Maybe there's a couple on the call, but not too many. Also want to point out too, size does not make the difference. That Electronic Data Systems is 10-point bold, but when you get down to the prior employment, those 3 employers are probably 8-point bold, could even be 7.5-point bold. Very tiny, getting smaller and smaller with the title and location. 3/4 of 1 inch on an entire sheet of paper, and they'll never be missed. Those are the nuggets of gold, the drops of perfume. Now below that, we'll give you some visuals here that will kind of tie those all together. They see the 3 stunning employers, like 3 of them hired you? Oh my gosh, you must be that amazing. At the very, very bottom here, I recommend you split the resume. We have efficient use of the resume all up until the very bottom, but then suddenly at the bottom it becomes inefficient. So I recommend splitting it. I want you to notice there are 3 universities here but only 2 of them are equal. The degrees do not trump the certificate, which the person did not have at this point. They do have it now. But those are not equal. So the one doesn't trump the other one. The degrees lead. Now, if this happens to be your field, you're probably jumping out of your chair because you know what? You're seeing that PMP over there. PMP. Oh my gosh, that's it. Tattoo it on my forehead. I totally get it. I know the PMP is the thing. But I also trust they will not miss it. And that PMP over where it belongs will be the cherry on top of that dessert. By the way, if you're so enamored with one of your acronyms, you could actually move it right up behind your name, say John Krant, PMP or CPA or whatever your acronym might be that you're enamored with. It's a way to get it up in the top if you wanted to. Remember, solving the real issues with your resume means you have to solve the story piece, but you also have to pay attention to the format. If you don't solve the format piece, it's not going to help you. Now, I'm going to give you the sizing on fonts here. I recommend you write that stuff down. I don't have it written down anywhere in my book or anyplace else, so I would write it down. Betty Jo is my cousin. I figured you didn't need her contact information, so we just shortened that a little bit here. So if you take everything on the page and you make it 10 point, everything then is 10 point or less on this page. Now, subtitle of my book is changing the rules, so I violate that rule right away. Go up to the name and make it 18 point bold. 18 point bold. Everything else on the page stays less. When you look at Good Samaritan Village or Salvation Army or United Way, these are all the people that have hired you. So you want to think about how you're going to separate those out. And we're going to do it just with a little bit of format framework. So we have our positioning title up at the top, which is always the target job that you're after. You have small labels like professional experience, or further down the page may say education or skills or community involvement. Who knows what you might have down there. Those all tend to be smaller. In this case, these are 7 point, all caps. But even 7 point, all caps, it pulls too much eye focus. So we hit them with just a little bit of gray so they disappear into the background. That allows Good Samaritan Village, Salvation Army, and United Way to come forward in the eyes. What they're after are those employers. And those employers married with the titles determine your value. What you notice here is the employers are all 10 point bold. Comma, location, and date are not only not bold, they're not 10 point, they're 7 point. You can have lots and lots of variety as long as you create a rule list, a specific rule list that you follow. Consistency will give you this beautiful look that's just suddenly readable, even though you may not really understand, well, why is it so readable this way? Then you want to indent your bullets. So you serve up the employer title on a platter, so easy for them to visually grab. Indent those bullets, make it all work for you. Adjust the spacing properly. By the way, after the bullet points, I recommend 1.75 points of space. After the title line, I recommend 4 points of space before the bullets. After the employer line, I recommend 2 points of space. Let's talk about that extra line up at Good Samaritan Village. Where is it? Up over here. Good Samaritan Village here has an extra line up top. The nation's largest non-for-profit long-term care organization. What is that doing there? Well, I spent 13 years in Florida before I escaped. and you know what? Every second or third mobile home or trailer park in Florida ends in the word village. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with working at a mobile home or trailer park. There's certainly not. But I can't have that mistake happen for this client. I can't have them suddenly think, wow, impressive employer. Oh gosh, went right into the toilet. What happened to your career? Can't let that happen. So if your employer is unknown to the person sitting next to you, that means they're unknown to the public. I'd recommend you put in this qualifying line, this descriptive line that elevates their value. This would not be a good use of your space for any company that is known. Use that space to talk about you. But in this case, we need to tell them this is another significant employer, and that's how we do it. And that, by the way, is an 8 point in size line. It does have 2 points after it, just like we would like. Begin to think about how all this work to create all of this stuff just makes it flow right into their brain. Just create a rule list. Now, contact line, we're going to like right below the name. So what do we want on this contact line? Well, I'd like it very, very simple. I'd like it to begin with the LinkedIn URL. They're holding the resume. If they're not convinced by holding this resume, I want them to have very easy one-click access to get to my LinkedIn. The three-dimensional sales brochure, which should have more story about you, should help close the deal. Followed by your city, state, followed by your email, and followed by your cell phone number. By the way, that's your cell phone number. That's not your home phone number. That's your cell phone number. It's followed by your cell phone number. If they're not convinced, they can call me. If they are convinced, they can call me. If they're not convinced, they can go look at my LinkedIn first until they're really convinced and ready to hire me. Now, adding space, let's just talk about this all at once. Now, I talked about 2 points here, 1.5 after the bullets, maybe 4 points of space after the title. How do we do all that? We're going to go up under format, down to paragraph. Here's where I do have to add a slight bit of apology for Microsoft. They've given you some defective software out here. Unfortunately, I have about 20 different versions of Word out there, and they all tend to look a little bit different, work a little bit different. So learn conceptually what I'm teaching you here. Go back and find it in your version of Microsoft Word. Go up under format, down to paragraph. And when you do that, you're going to get this little box that pops up. And right in it, there's a space for points after. So you can just put 2, enter, or 4, enter, or 1.75, enter, whatever space you need after each line to create beautiful space to absorb information. You just add it there and hit enter, and then magically you're going to have it. Now, if you need to reduce space between characters, let's take that title line, not title line, but contact line as an example. My LinkedIn URL, my city, state, my email address, my phone number. By the way, that gets long. And by the time I make that 7 point, it gets tiny. There we go. Tiny and hard to read. It's not font size that makes things easy to read. It's the space between the characters. If you highlight the entire line, go up under format, now go to font instead of paragraph. You're going to get a font window that pops up, and under the advanced tab, you can either expand or condense the character spacing. I'm going to add 1, 2, 3 points of space until the whole contact line spreads out again nicely across the whole page, and it will be completely readable. 5 iterations probably to get to the right version. Don't stop too early. Now, talk for a minute about work pedigree. Very interesting word. I think of horses and dog food, and okay, we have the right word. You're probably getting the 3 to 5 seconds look at the resume, but probably missing a little bit. We're looking at the quality of these companies, right or wrong, titles and accomplishments, even though I said we wouldn't look at your accomplishments, and of course, your educational background. Now, here's the proof. Here is the world's simplest resume, Todd Smith, Nestle USA, Director of Quality Assurance, Kraft Foods, Quality Assurance Manager, and Coca-Cola Company, Quality Assurance Engineer, University of Florida, BS Agriculture. If this is all that's on the resume, I guarantee you this is the world's simplest resume. So what can we get from this? Well, we got the degree. That's usually a pretty good thing. And oh my gosh, I see career progression from engineer to manager to director. And oh, stunning companies. These are great companies, aren't they? I usually do that in live audience until someone goes, oh, yeah, they are. I'm like, baiting the audience to get them to interact. I'm like, oh, those are great companies. I'm like, how do you know? Let me be clear. I never worked food and beverage. I never worked with these companies as a recruiter. I don't know if they're any good. But I do have a close friend and a long-term client that's worked for GTE Internetworking, which became Genuity, worked for Liberty Media, Level 3 Communications, Nokia Siemens Networks. Now they're over at Cisco Systems. And I can tell you every single one of those companies is messed up internally beyond belief. Internal reorganization at all times. It's a meat grinder chopping up and spitting out their employees. And, oh, my friend works there. Okay. So are these like those, or are these great companies? I don't know. Have you anybody worked for a great company? When I ask that in a live audience, I get 3 or 4 hands out of about 60. And I'm like, oh, the rest of us thought we made some bad decisions. So let's just prove it to you. Let's assume we have Todd here, as you see, world's simplest resume. But now you have another candidate just trying to get the interview spot, not to be hired, just the interview spot. And they have the degree, University of Florida. They have the same thing. They have the engineer to manager to director, the same career progression. But they've done it for 3 food and beverage companies you've never heard of. And there's like a million of those. Let's see. Who's going to get the interview? Todd or the other person? Todd. There is no question. Todd gets this interview every single time. And that's what happens with the value. Now you saw a resume with nothing on it, value everywhere, but nowhere to be seen. There is no detail here, and yet you felt value. Now you have to think about how your accomplishments need to be bullet pointed for absorption and what communicates tangible, deliverable benefits to those businesses. It means focus it on revenues or expenses or efficiency or inefficiency, somehow the performance effect that you had by being involved. And somehow let that translate here. It needs to translate into something that's going to make sense. Degrees of degrees. Now, have you received in hand your college degree? I know that's a very strange way to ask. I learned to ask it that way only as a recruiter when I found out people were lying to me. You know what 3 credits shy of a degree is? No degree. You know when you didn't pay that $175 you still owed? You know what you have? No degree. Degrees, have you received it? All that matters is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So if you did not receive it, yes, you still put your college or university, you put your coursework toward your field of study, not coursework toward a BS and whatever. That's a little too close to the baloney line. You cannot be seen as misrepresenting or even trying to misrepresent on anything educational. Has to be absolutely crystal clear. Now, designing your resume, all I'm talking about here is the goal is to move your brand forward by having focus on you, visualize your career, visualize the value you've been able to deliver throughout your career. Of course, we have to inform about that educational background as well. Oh, let's have a last word about Word. You already know what I think about Word. It's an example of some of the worst software out there. By the way, I would love Microsoft if they wrote great software, but really it's some of the worst garbage on this planet. Word is a perfect example. No matter how long this thing has been out there, and it's been out there a long time, they have just never bothered to ever fix it properly. You spend all the time to make your resume perfect the way I just recommended, and then you dare send a Word document to someone, you have no idea what it looks like. A few years back, I was doing a reality TV pilot episode. Some folks came to see me. They said, oh, we have this idea for a makeover show, and part of it's going to be career. I would like to play around and experiment. I'm like, hey, I'm always game. Let's try it. And so I finished up my morning lecture at the Upper West Side YMCA that year, walked across Central Park to go meet at this guy's apartment where they'd been filming some earlier stuff. They were going to film my stuff out in Queens, and got to meet the crew and everything. I pulled out his resume, and he goes, oh, what happened to my resume? I'm like, what do you mean? That's the resume I was sent. You have to save the new one for camera. You can't be surprised twice. And I'm like, that is your resume. What do you mean? And he runs to the other room to get his resume. And his resume in his version was a single sheet of paper. On my version, it was a full page and a half. Yeah, the text was identical, but visually the text was completely different because the preferences file that told it what to look like stayed on his computer. And when it traveled to my computer, it opened by my preferences file, which could be very similar, and it might look similar, or could be a completely different animal. So when you're all done making this perfect thing, and there's a video over on my YouTube site called Headless Horseman, you can learn how to make it into a PDF, a perfect frozen state that would just be perfect. Wherever you are in your process with your resume, understand that it is a big challenge. It's very difficult emotionally to take our story with all the baggage and reinvent it. If you need help, I think you know where to find me, or check out SelfRecruiter.com. We have a couple extra minutes, so I want to basically give you some bonus material here on cover letter, because a cover letter really does go with the resume. It's very, very important. It's the chance to show our authentic self and to communicate our brand vision. Over on my resume, over on my website, you can just click under the advice tab and you can get to both some resume samples and knock, how to write a cover letter that opens doors. Give you a little of the secrets here, but over on LinkedIn, this will help you quite a bit. Over on my website, it's there as well. You can look either place and see it. This is about creating engagement, which of course is closer to this engagement. Now it has to be about them because it's a date. So it can never be about you, even though it's all about you. It has to be about them first. What is it about their company? What is it about you're seeing? It's your job to be bold and confident and not be submissive, even if you're a little church mouse in your normal life. This is where you have to give yourself permission to step out of your comfort zone. Now, I certainly have told lots of folks in my live lectures that in reality, I'm shy and introverted, and yet this is what I do. So if I'm shy and introverted and I can still do this in front of audiences and do it live over Zoom and other things, well, gosh, then I think you can learn how to step out of your comfort zone and give yourself permission to take credit for what you've delivered, for what you've developed, for what you own. It's your job in that cover letter also to build the chemistry. Show them why you're valuable. Overcome any objections that you can imagine they might have about you. Your job is to overcome those things and get that meeting. Now, a little more of the detail here. It's very similar. We're probably going to have an opening and closing paragraph, probably 2 or 3 paragraphs maybe in between. Now, I'm not an attorney, although I've watched lots of law programs on TV. Basically, when we're in front of the jury making the opening or closing remarks to the jury, different rules of evidence and everything apply. You can make a much more emotional pitch in that moment. Same thing here. You can make much more emotional pitch on your open and closing paragraph, 2 or 3 factual paragraphs that link up and deliver some of the detail. And then your job in the cover letter isn't just to be nice and I hope they pick me. Your job is to close them, which simply means ask for something that you'd like and ask for agreement. It takes both of these. You can't just ask for what you'd like and never ask for the agreement. The agreement part is where they say no. Gosh, I'd love to meet with you. I have an opening on my calendar. My calendar. Your words are very important. Tuesday at 10 a.m. Might that work for a brief meeting? Looking forward to a great discussion. I guess this guy thinks he's going to meet with me. Yes. Why would you not meet with me unless you are a crazy person or you're not really qualified for your own job? This is all part of the take back control process. Now, if you're joining in tomorrow's going to be a LinkedIn Showplace at 12 noon. Next week on Tuesday, 5 p.m., we'll do the interviewing session. And of course, after that, on the Thursday, we'll do the job search session. Don't forget, you can check over on LinkedIn for a few of the other resources. And I know we had a little bit of an internet glitch right in the middle of this. I don't know if StreamYard will marry these two or they may be separate. We're going to find out. But see you tomorrow at noon. And don't forget, if you need some help, selfrecruiter.com. And we'll talk to you soon. Take care.